it's like when you're teaching, teach the classrooms we teach are a mirror to the communities we serve, to what's happening in your society. It's to step in the classroom requires a lot of reflection and adaptability. And I just thought this quote resonated with me in the sense of the journey I've been in thinking about is of how knowing our own story, knowing where we came from, and knowing our student stories, knowing our teacher stories is as important as pedagogy and content. And I think that's just resonated because math teachers, we don't go here. We talk about pedagogy, we talk about content, but we don't always talk about um, the just knowing my own story. So that I want to start with, get this out of the way, just my story a little bit. And my story is that I guess the Cliff Note version is I experienced mathematics, K-12 mathematics, like it was a system built for me. Throughout K-12, I got the message that it's like you're good at math, move, accelerate, do faster. I ended up being a math major. And so I never had really experience of having a negative experience in mathematics where I didn't know what's going on in the math class. And so that was a privilege to go through the K-12 experience like that. And I became a high school and middle school math teacher. And when I got to the classroom, I realized not everyone experienced math like me. It was actually like students want to know, when am I going to use this? Why am I in this class? Questions I didn't ask a lot, but I has challenged me. And I think early in my career avoided those questions. And the picture on the right actually is not of a math class. It's a science class I taught in middle school. And what I like about that image just in my head is thinking about the students were leaning in to whatever that content is. And that was something I could do in science class. We could have experiences where students were excited, they're leaning in, they wanted to engage. But math classes would have been pretty boring if I took a picture. It's me lecturing, doing worksheets. And so a lot of what I've been trying to do is thinking about like, what could math class look like that students would want to lean in and learn the same way as I could do in my science class. So that's kind of my backstory. And I want to also give voice to someone else as well. I've been trying to, like, this is like kind of favorite question the last year and a half. What's your story? Tell me your story. And I think that's important as we think about pathways, as think about the why behind this. There's no mandate in terms of like thou shalt do something like, offer data science. I think it's a good idea, but the reason why we're doing it is because of the stories that we're listening to. So I'm going to give voice to Carlos from Lane, who recorded his story for us as well. And let me know if you don't hear the audio on this, because I want to make sure it comes through.
My name is Carlos Sequeira, and I am currently a director of school improvement at Lane ESD. Here in Oregon, I've been working in this position for 5 years now. One of the projects that was given to me as I took on this job was a program, a grant funded initiative called Math in Real Life. And one of the reasons I think that why I was attracted to this work was because of my own personal interaction, I would say, and story with math. I myself, I'm an immigrant to this country. I grew up in Central America, and I had the good fortune of attending an American school, much like an immersion school here in the United States. Even though it was in Nicaragua, it was an all English speaking school. So you can imagine an 11-year-old boy who didn't speak a word of English being thrown into a math class and trying to learn middle school math without understanding what the teacher was saying. I got numbers, right? And I understood, multiplication and addition and subtraction and division, But when it came to the more complex parts of math, word problems especially was really difficult for me to engage with. And there were, and it was a task that it was given at the end usually of the chapter. So you did all this math, and at the end there was an application where you're supposed to demonstrate what you had learned. And so at the end of the lesson, at the end of the chapter, I just did not feel very successful at all. And so I created this identity that I wasn't good at math because I didn't understand what was being said in the class. And so it wasn't until my 9th grade year when my English was getting better, right? But I actually met a teacher that actually not only taught math and knew math, but loved math and showed interest in us as students. And so it was the first time I really think that I was in a space where it was safe for me. Even I'm sharing this right now, I'm getting a little bit choked up because for 3 or 4 years, I had carried this notion in my head that I was terrible at math. So I brought myself into that space already thinking, I'm not good at this. Why should I be here? And so it was my very first experience being in a space where the teacher really took interest in identifying why I was struggling with math, what parts of it. And she made the connection of the language piece. And she met with my ELL teacher, and my ELL class became a math class, became a place where I could learn the terms and the concepts and the application of the concepts. So fast forward, 30 years, when I had the opportunity to lead this work, right away, I noticed that there were people, teachers, part of the initiative that were leading this work, and they were by the way, my teacher's name was Miss Wiley. And so where I could see several Miss Wileys in the room.
Several Miss Wileys in the room. And so I don't, this is where I usually do, like sometimes I break out, but I know I think just for the purpose of time, I don't think we need to do breakout right now. But I am curious a little bit about what your math story is. Maybe in the chat, just type, what's a word or phrase when you think about mathematics, especially high school mathematics and your experience, what words or phrases come up for you when you think about math in your experience? And it could be a range. It could be like I felt belonged, I enjoyed it, I had fun. Like that's my experience. Carlos had a very different experience. So I think there's a spectrum of experiences. Yeah, mixed experience, pain, painful because it's how to think in a different way. Yeah, people love math. Maybe it takes more than one experience to make sense. Yeah, some people are successful. Absolutely. Statistics, having a new content area. Yeah, Will, I see it. I hear that experience too. That's one thing we see, the students who struggle in math and just have a different opportunity like in stats can flourish. Retaking math every school year, Beth, huh? Yeah. I think, and so I think I want to just highlight is whenever you think about math, there's a range of experiences. I think that so I would name that the system does work for some students. So the question is like, not it does work for, I guess the question is, who's it work for? It worked for me. And I wonder what would the system look like if it worked for everybody. And so I guess what I want to frame the language here is like in terms of like, Algebra 2 or not Algebra 2. The goal is not to create courses for students who can't take Algebra 2. I think right now I disrupt that language. It's like the goal of this work is to create courses for students who may not need Algebra 2 or are not interested in it or don't see the usefulness of it. And I think there is a useful math that we all want to know, K-8 math, but at some point it really becomes specialized. And I would say that Algebra 2, pre-calculus, calculus, wonderful, useful subjects, but 10% of the majors require it. And I think as a population, I think we have, probably less than 10% that actually need to know that content. But we have a system where we're trying to get all students into that same bucket. And I think there's lots of space for different options for students. And that's a big reason why we're doing this, is like, what would math classes look like that students would choose or want to sign up for, not because they have to, but because they want to. So as you do this work, I really encourage you to think about your own math experience, be able to tell your own math story, and ask these questions of teachers in your schools and students, and get their stories, because it will, it is like knowing yourself is important as the pedagogy in courses. So I just want to always kind of frame the work in this idea of story and lead to this idea of the math project. And we named 4 cornerstones. And in the second half, I want to make sure we just kind of go through the 4 cornerstones and how the work is moving forward in our state in these areas. So when I think of the Oregon Math Project, I'm thinking about engineering a system for equity, engineering a system that all students can succeed, all students can see themselves as math people, all students can see math being useful. So that system is different than we have now, because right now it filters and sorts and gives messages that maybe you're good at math and maybe you're not. Maybe you're a math person, maybe you're not. And I think we want to move to that. And so we need to build that system. And there's these 4 cornerstones that we are built. The language of, when we think about K-12, what do we need to talk about? We're talking about focus, engagement, pathways, and belonging. And we keep going back to these. And it's like 10 years from now, I want the system to be more focused, more engaging, have options, and where all students belong. So thinking about like focus and engagement, we really want to have courses that teachers can say like, yeah, I can do this in a year. We minimize repeating content for students. We create space, instructional space to do interesting things like engagement. So if we create space, we make them more school year more focused, we fill it with engaging activities. So we want to fix the mile wide, inch deep. I'll make it more focused, more narrow. We can do depth through engagement. We also want pathways. We want individual options for students, not just courses, but choices throughout K-8. How do I apply this? Where do I have some agency and build that identity that's useful to me personally? And then that belonging is, how do we create spaces where all students can come and feel welcome, and their ideas can be shared in a space that's safe. I think Carlos talked about that. Like, it didn't feel safe. First thinking until you got to Miss Wiley's class, and all of a sudden, like, he had a space where he felt like he belonged. And I think that's whatever we do, all our math classes need to have that experience. So just some highlights. We did do a K-12 math review and revision. So we do have new standards adopted, and we're going to do a state materials review this summer. If you're looking at the standards and you want to go through and compare the Common Core, K-8 is largely the same in terms of the structure and standards. We did add a K-12 data reasoning that's new that we're going to be asking our teachers, but for the most part for K-8, this is the kind of changes you'll see. Sometimes we copy and paste it over. Sometimes we took the examples out. And really the goal was not to lower the rigor, but just make it clear. Focus. I wanted anyone to read this and just kind of, oh, let's just say add fractions in this period. And so that was kind of the style guide we used. And in 7th grade, we see the example of A, B, C, D. We took that out, but there's a goal, multiply and divide rational numbers. That's still there. We still want to apply. We use the term authentic context instead of real world, but all the details, it's kind of like, well, that's instructional details. We should do that in support documents. That shouldn't be part of the standards. And so that's just a style guide that you would see. So when you print the standards now, all the grades fit on 2 pages. So you can print 7th grade on front and back, which is a lot shorter. And I think that's just, there's something about that that seems less intimidating. That's my goal. So I want standards to be read by everybody, parents, community, administrators, counselors, everyone can read this. Oh, I can make sense of this document. So that's our goal, and that's been adopted. And now we're moving towards the materials review process. When I think about engagement, I think about how we maybe like classrooms haven't changed a lot in sense of like, especially high school classrooms where we have students in rows and teachers lecturing, doing activities. We made more progress in elementary, I believe, but when I think about engagement, that's that leaning in. We had a math in real life project. So Lane has like examples. The pictures on the right is like students were collecting data on different types of holiday lights during Christmas time, like LED versus standard, which one makes sense. And so they were collecting data and they were using systems equations to figure out what price point or how much I use it. Does it make sense to maybe use it to pay extra for LED lights? The picture on the right is there's a company in Eugene that creates stretch fabric. And so they worked with teachers to create a lesson around building like awnings or artistic shapes. So they had to create a net, but they had to do stretch ratios. So they had to cut the fabric to a little smaller than they wanted. So it stretched to what they intended to be. And so these are just kind of like applications that are interesting students. And I think about kind of this continuum of engagement where we have like, I have one axis kind of like called fiction, nonfiction. It's like, it's the tree that all the heights are perfect whole numbers, 3, 4, 5 triangles. Like that's fiction. It looks like a tree, but it's really a fiction problem. I want these more nonfiction, authentic, and or like, I think there's a place for all these type of activities, but right now with math seems to be living in this fiction world. And then also think about low alignment to my interests. It's not useful, not interesting, to high alignment. So any movement I celebrate out of this kind of lower quadrant that math seems to be stuck in, where it's like application problems are not interesting or not engaging, and movement out to is good. And I want to just kind of frame that because that's part of the other voice I want to share is student voices, in terms of when they experience mathematics this way, what does this create? And so I just wanted, I know, so yeah, we can do, I'll just play a couple of minutes of this, but I want to make sure we hear our students in terms of like what happens when we think of math differently like this, and make it engaging and more focused.
I haven't ever really had a big project like this that is so focused around real world issues. Like, sure, maybe there have been a little that's like, oh, this is about like presidency or like the government or whatever, but we haven't had a full on project that's exploring a lot of different issues and social justice things. Like, people did projects on like food and people in poverty and unemployment and things like that, and other really important topics that we usually don't discuss as much in especially math classes. In math classes, that's never like a thing that we do, is talk about politics. But this project like combined math and real world issues just so we could express that and be able to see it in a more like material way.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time when we're learning math, it's just kind of like, oh, this is math, and I have to do this problem, I have to do my homework, and it's not like something you want to do. Whereas with this, it didn't always feel like we were actually doing math. Like we knew it was math, and we knew it's a math class, but we were talking so much about this other subject that we kind of forgot that we were doing math during the process of it. So it was kind of a really cool and good way to do math without feeling the obligation and the like being annoyed at doing it, and just kind of like liking to do it.
They felt a little bit confused at first. Why are we talking about this in math class? And I liked it, and I loved it when they asked that, because then we could talk about other examples, like we could talk about fencing a dog pen, or something like that, if that would be more exciting. But but these are the types of things that are going on in the world around us, that are important for us to think about. And they got it. I felt like they got the message and appreciated it.
Through the questioning, it was forcing the kids to actually delve deeper into the math about it. Because then I could say, well, what's the math in here? And they'd be like, well, where is the math in here? The element of curiosity, trying to question their own selves. And particularly with our second project, where we were asking, is there a connection between literacy and lifespan? And you had kids that at the beginning of the lesson were like, no way, there shouldn't be a connection in that. And then through actually working through the mathematics and then the discourse that came from the other students, are like, oh, wait a second, maybe that makes sense. And just the actual process of it, of kind of butting heads and then being like, oh, okay.
Overwhelmingly, I think the response was, this is not only interesting for us to be looking at now, but this is something that's going to stick with me. And I'm glad that I have learned about this, because I have now a reference to consider kind of these issues more broadly.
Well, I've always seen math when I was younger as something that everyone learns, but it may not necessarily affect, well, most of it may not affect your life later. So sometimes I'll be doing a problem or something, I'm like, how is this going to benefit me later on in life? But I think that if you talk about math in the real context, or in the real world, so you're doing real world problems and doing math within stuff that will affect your actual life, I think that it helps a lot more than just studying different equations and problems.
Yeah, I totally agree, because they always have like word problems and stuff, but like last year I'd be thinking like, when am I going to go to the grocery store and have to pick up like 17.3 apples and then like, divide that by whatever. So this is like actually relating it to something that's actually going to help me eventually.
But then as we got into it, I started seeing like, wow, this is actually a big problem, and we're learning about how different things work. And so I think it was very fun, and lots more teachers should be doing it.
I'll pause there, but I think one of the things I just note that math has a feeling. Didn't feel like a math class. I was looking over my shoulder. Was this a math class? It's like, and just the expectation they come into math class like this is not going to be relevant. How many of our students hold that? And I think I really want to make sure we frame the work as like, this is not just a high school work. This is a K-12 work issue. And that may lead to courses at some point. If we keep on doing real life math, students will want to know, like, I really want to specialize in a math course. And if that's the consequence of it's like doing real life math through K-12, is you want to do more and more as we get in high school. So how do we build that system to do that? So I just put a lot of text, I think, but I'll give you slides, links to this. But when I think about belonging, there is certainly, I would name this idea of detracking. You may have heard in K-12. And I think the thing about mathematics, a couple ideas. One is the development of mathematics is a little bit delayed from reading. So when I think about reading, I have elementary kids. We do a lot of reading in K2, and we talk about like a 5th grade reading level. And I had a middle school teacher when we went into middle school that said, like, you know, we're doing middle school reading language arts. We're not actually going to spend as much time teaching your child to read, but we're going to use reading to learn about new topics. And if you need reading, we'll have that help. And so there's that shift, I think, in literacy. In mathematics, I think there is that shift too. It's like where you learn to do math, and then we have enough math knowledge that we can use it to learn about our world. But I think it happens later. And I think the critical stages of math is kind of like new content, 3-5, fractions, ratios, proportions, and 6-8 are critical. If I had to pick a grade band, I would say the 6-8 math is the most important content a student will learn K-12. And so my question is, like, how would a system look like if we held space for that content to learn it deeply? And I feel like that the system we have now is rushing. When we accelerate in middle school, we are rushing students through that important content so that they can spend 3 or 4 years doing algebra in high school. That's not as important. I would actually say algebra 2, pre-calculus, and college algebra. When we mathematically content, put all the syllabi together, we've done this a couple of times now, and I think I can keep doing it, but those courses are more the same than different. So we're basically forcing students to repeat content in those courses. And it's like, why don't we teach middle school math the depth? You know, so what would that look like? Making it really interesting, really applied. You're not behind if you're taking 8th grade math in 8th grade. How we can shift that conversation. And if we do need to accelerate, I think we need to think about acceleration or compacting courses in high school, not middle school. So I don't see any reason why we couldn't create a pathway to calculus that starts in 9th grade that combines 2 or 3 courses in high school, where there's a lot of repeated content. So I think those are just some shifts I want to, like, we're posing. We don't have, again, not a mandate, but we really want to challenge our teachers to think about this and where these choices are being made for our students. We are working with universities and colleges to redefine application, like what courses are acceptable for admissions. And usually these are 4-year universities, but I guess the big picture is we want to shift away from algebra 2 being synonymous with college ready. It's not. It's algebra 2 is pre-calculus, is calculus ready. College ready means you do high school math. High school math is algebra 1, geometry, and data. That's our adopted standards. And so that's what we're trying to kind of shift some of the conversations around. And I would like to see more technology being used. It's like I would never have written by hand a dissertation, but with technology, I can access it. And I think we're in a position to give access to more students through technology. So how are we using that is a really important question for our math teachers. So I want to end with the idea of pathways. And I'll try to finish up and open up for questions, but because this is probably where you're thinking a lot. It's like detracking is one conversation I know is happening. I think we want to move with caution let's go slow to go far kind of thing. That's definitely, I think that let's make sure we're set up for that. And that means supporting teachers with instructional strategies as part of that work. Understanding pathways, there is a K-12 pathway progression. So we do name algebra, number, so algebraic reasoning, numeric reasoning, geometric reasoning, data reasoning. These are K-12 titles now. So in kindergarten, you'll see the word algebra. And I think that was really important to me to make sure that our elementary teachers know that there is content they're doing that's laying the foundation to algebra as early as kindergarten. And that is just happens to go into a course in high school. We're doing data, K-12. Data could turn into a course in high school, it could turn to a major later, but we're all doing data reasoning. So that was kind of the thinking about these paths. So I think about if every teacher every year has this language and says, you know, so as a parent, I can come in and say, what's my child learning math? Say that this is what they're learning algebra, this is what they're learning numbers, this is learning geometry, this is learning data. I think that would be really powerful in our system. So this could be at some point lead to a specialized course. And so this is the 2+1 model. So the question we asked our content panel is, but it took 7 years talking with math teachers to kind of landed on this, but instead of algebra, geometry, algebra 2, what's this new model? And the question I asked the high school panel is like, how much math past grade 8 do all students need to know? Let's say everyone needs to know grade K8 math. How much more do all students need to know to be college ready, to be career ready? And the answer is not 3 years. The answer is like we could come up with 2 years of content that we still think is important past 8th grade, about a year's worth of algebra, a semester of geometry, and a semester of data. So really the semester data, reason why we pulling back on geometry is so we create space for a semester, at least content of data for all students. And that can be as a course or as integrated 1 and 2. So there's flexibility. That's the core. That's our standards. That's where we're writing to. That's where we're going to align our assessments to. That's where we're going to align our accountability system to, is that core 2. The +1, the third credit, is a specialized third credit. So we don't have standards for algebra 2. We don't have standards for 3rd or 4th year math intentionally, because if I write a standard, we're going to have to write assessment to it. So we're going to come up with guidance documents, but they're not going to be board adopted content. And I think there's these paths. We talk about a path to calculus. The algebra content you need to get to calculus, that still exists. We're not asking anyone to take that away. What we like to ask is add to, or think about options that could be additional options. And data seems to be one that has a lot of legs and interest around. So create a data science option is something we're certainly looking into. Is thinking about that could lead to maybe a data course in college, a 100 level data course. I think a quantitative path as being take CTE, take every program and study, say construction. We're gonna have a construction math, computer science. We're gonna have a computer science math. We're going to have health and human services, or business, finance. There is it's like a year or semester's experience that could be around a specialized kind of program study. So none of these are dead ends. They're going to somewhere. A path goes somewhere. So you need a destination. And so the destination calculus, let's build a path calculus. Destinations computer science, let's build a path to computer science. And so that's really the ask, is these 3rd or 4th year experiences aligned to that. And I think, yeah, so this is I'll end with this. We do have a high school Mathways grant. We have $2 million that's going to go out this next summer for 22-23. We have 6 STEM hubs. We're in the process of finalizing those agreements now. That would be taking on different aspects of the Mathways. So for example, Portland Metro STEM Hub is looking to create a applied algebra 1 course that aligns to the physics first course from Beaverton. So it'll be kind of a block class. So they're going to be working on that course development. High Desert is going to be Point, High Desert ESD, STEM Hub, be Point on data science. Lane is going to take this idea of a semester geometry. We have Valawa ESD, GoSTEM. It's going to work on what does this look like for our rural and remote schools. And so they're looking to bring a program from Ohio, it's a math modeling course, as an option to Algebra 2. And so that's kind of the setup. We have all these grants going on that's going to take, and then we'll have 6 courses a year from now that we can share under open license, of a course framework, a blueprint. We'll have a professional learning module that's going to be work as OSU and teacher development group are going to be developing a series of 3 teacher modules and 1 administrator to share about these instructional shifts. What does the instruction have to happen in all our courses? Those shifts, what does it look like? Applied learning, aligned to student interests. So that work will happen as well. And there is a part, I think this last part I'll end on, alignment. We are working with higher education to revise the course catalogs for our public universities. So we have a small advisory group, 16 members right now, mostly higher ed, mostly admission staff, but we do have space for 4 K-12 representatives. We're going to have like a TOSA, a superintendent, and I would love to have counseling represented as well in this group. And the task for this phase 1 work is really, what is the words that's going to be on our university websites when it says 3 credits of math? What's the clause that comes after it? Is there a clause? If there is, what's the wording? And we need to take Algebra 2 off, wherever it is. Stop naming courses, because that's limiting to us in the pathway. So it has support, and that's moving forward. That would be the class of 2024 is as soon as that could ever change. So that's our kind of our goal. And the phase 2 would be about what makes a high school math course. If we're not naming courses, what makes high school math. And so we're going to have a work group next school year with the university and K-12 that will come up with some agreements in terms of like, when we develop a course like construction geometry, what do you want to know about it? What's the sched code? What's the unit overview? So we want to have like this outline in terms of what we share with each other in K-12 and higher ed, so we can communicate across the system. So that work group will not develop courses, but develop the outline for these shared blueprints that we're going to be making moving forward. And so it will keep me busy. And again, so I'll put that ask, I went on to ask, I would love to have high school counseling or counseling representative who may be interested in this work this next school year in alignment. And we talk about more having counselors in more spaces. This is certainly a space we would want to have the K-12 counseling voice as well.
Mark,
I'll
you have
pause
one
here.
volunteer in the chat already. Jacqueline says yes, that she would like to be volunteer on that task force. And then there's a really great question from Will. So Will asked about, are these classes for multiple students? And so basically, Mark, you're talking about creating different types of math courses, or districts would create different math courses to offer students kind of based on like what their interests or kind of like their pathway is, these options. And then the other part of his question is around thinking about FTE and teacher preparation for multiple courses. How does that allow students, does it allow students to be able to go deep? Is there some kind of short course that they take, multiple courses that are then combined? So what could that look like with FTE, getting, teachers trained in multiple courses and
Beth,
being able to go deep?
Can I just maybe give my context for that a little bit?
Sure.
So yeah, my thought is, I heard you say something along the lines of, math for a specific CTE, and at our school, I'm going to just off the top of my head, maybe got 6 to 8 CTE courses. And I'm thinking, boy, if we made, a math CTE for each of those courses, that's a lot of new courses we're developing. And then we're going to have a teacher that has to be assigned that and has to be familiar with that and trained up in that. And then that's another prep that they're doing potentially. So are we maybe seeing that out of these, however many CTE classes you have, maybe you've got 3 that kind of are similar. So maybe you develop a similar course for them, and then you find a math teacher that can teach that, or is that a CTE teacher teaching that?
I think the best model seems to be a math teacher working with the CTE teacher. So the math teacher delivers the content, but they're working in partnership with a CTE instructor to develop lessons. And so that partnership is really important, I think, to develop those courses. And I think when I think about those courses, I don't want to put pressure on saying like, you have to have 16 courses. Like, no, I don't want to. But in some communities, a math for ag may make sense. Like you have a critical mass of students, like math for ag makes sense. Then another community might have math for computer science, makes sense. And so I think what I want to encourage us to think about in the grade 11 and grade 12 space is, what would your students in community be interested in? I think Algebra 2 pre-calculus should still, without a doubt, still exist. I don't think we need as many sections of Algebra 2. I think that's part of it. Is like I don't like whatever FTE you have for Algebra 2. It's like it's like some of those sections. I think we need to get those Algebra 2 teachers teaching like a data class. So I think we can, like, I would see it, if we could have a balance between these options, Algebra 2, data, or an applied course. I think each of those options reflect our students. Then I think we're in a space where, like the demographics of our students, not just a lesser path for students who are struggling. Then we're in a place, I think that's an equitable system. And to be honest, I think a data class, a data experience is probably going to be more useful to more students than any algebra content they've ever taken in grade 11. So if they don't know what career they want to do or kind of what they say, like they're in a space like, I'm not sure what I want to do. I wonder how can we get to the default where it's like, well, take data. Whatever career you're going to do, you're going to be dealing with data. And if you want to still take algebra too, or that algebra to calculus, you can still take it in grade 12 or take it concurrently. I don't think they're prerequisites of each other. Like you have to do one. So I think it's kind of like college. You have a catalog. What do you want to take? The only prerequisite is you finish the core 2. I think that's what we want to build it to.
Thank you, Mark, for your response. There's another question in the chat. Becca's curious about how teachers are being informed about this, trained, etc. Also, is there a concern around how these would possibly fit into master schedules? And then the last part of the question is, how do you envision school counselors' role in this work?
Yeah, I think I will own that I need to learn more about master schedules and FTE and how those things work. And so I think that's where I love to have collaboration help me understand, think through this. I think what I wanted, my role here is like, as I share with teachers is I'm giving permission. Please make math fun, make it interesting. If you're doing that, you're on the right track. Whether that's an Algebra 1 course or an 8th grade course, let's do this for all our courses. The other part is at some point we can specialize in mathematics. Like in science, we do create courses that are, my son's going to South Salem and they have like an environmental science class they can take. So that was something that's a specialized science class that they could take in grade 11. I like to think the 11th grade options are kind of similar in that way. And how can we design core 2 to connect with the 3rd credit so they all have a data experience, they all have a construction experience, and they all have a computer science experience. So they kind of know something about that 3rd credit that they're doing the first 2 years. So in terms of master scheduling, I'm not sure how that will work exactly, but we did try to create options for in terms of licensure, including some course options like statistics, math modeling that could be taught with a foundational license, not an advanced license. So I think my hope is that some of those 3rd credit options could be taught like I'll pick one, financial algebra, a business, applied business, like that is an algebra course. That should be able to taught with a foundational license. And so if we can create options for 3rd credits to be taught with by more people, I think that's maybe one way we can get some of those courses taught. And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as the counselors in this work, I think there is an important kind of paradigm shift that we need to think together as a education community in terms of what are we communicating to students in terms of being ready after graduation, and so it's like, I think it's like, if they don't take Algebra 2, are they ready? Kind of thing. It's like, well, Algebra 2 is a requirement only because we made it so. It's like it's a collective agreement that we seem to have. It's not a mathematical agreement. It's not math. It's like you can do Algebra 1, you can go college algebra, but somehow as a system, we've held up this course. And I think, how can we not put pressure on our students and teachers and system that you have to get through this hole to be successful? That's the filter. And so I think we want to create space for, it's like, how can we help like the individual plan and profile? What are you interested in doing? Or you want to go to community college? What class do you want to take? I want to be a math major. You need to take calculus your first year, so you need to be ready for calculus. Or what school you want to go to, what's the admission requirements there. So I think helping students align those course choices, but giving, like asking students, like, what do you want to do? And I think there's good options that doesn't have to be taking an Algebra 2 class. That's what we're hoping to create, are those options. But as those options are developed, I think we need to share them with our students and let them choose, have some agency in choosing, and not just be filtering, just a tracking with a different name is kind of my fear. It's like having these courses, like it's just it's a different name for, like, financial algebra can be great. Financial algebra can be an old business math dumping ground. So I think part of that, how do we counsel students in the different options to help them understand it and help make an informed choice? Because I think it's going to be more on families and students to understand these options, but not a bazillion options, but I think the branches can start in grade 11.
Mark, there was another question about, work around that you're doing for college admissions, and will they accept the changes in math?
Yeah, so there's a national conversation happening around Algebra 2 that I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see more and more movement. I think the land grant universities, APLUs, talking about making a position statement. This is probably next year in terms of expanding options beyond Algebra 2. California has added data options as a third credit for the California system. Ohio is a state that's doing a lot of work in this area as well. And I think what we have here in Oregon, when we shared with the provost this winter, trying to figure out who do I contact, we finally got in the provost council for the universities and share this issue of Algebra 2 being on the, because that's the only place I can find in writing where Algebra 2 is a requirement. It's not in our law, it's not in our statutes, nowhere in our graduation requirements, but it's on these admission. It's on these like admission pages to name a course. So the provosts are supportive of making the change where they're not naming a course. In terms of, so we have the provost support. What they have asked is to have a task force kind of help them with the wording that could be taken back to our 7 public 4-year universities. And so that's work that's happening this summer. And it's going to be facilitated by the Dana Center, who's been doing work in this space of math pathways nationally from UT Austin. So I think it's going to happen. I just don't know what the word's going to land.
Mark, there's some other great questions in the chat. So Jacqueline mentioned that they're an AVID district and prepare all students to have opportunity to attend college. So she's talking about AVID meaning ready for a 4-year college.
Mm-hmm.
Becca mentioned, and it looks like from a question Teresa had, sorry, Teresa, if I missed your question, but about the NCAA and the NAIA Athletics Clearinghouse. I'm not sure if there was a question there, so I apologize.
That was actually Rebecca's question, but I do know that they have those requirements. And at least, I mean, I'm not at high school now, but I know that to get in, kids had to have Algebra 2 at the college level. So it'd be great if they're going to change those requirements for admission. But as of right now, we had to push some kids to take Algebra 2, even though they didn't want to, so they could get in.
Yeah, we've had conversation with NCAA, and I think there's when they presented to one of our work groups, in terms of their work and their catalog, like what courses count for high school credit, their general threshold is an Algebra 1 course, not Algebra 2. So it's if it's kind of Algebra 1 and above kind of level, then they usually they have a process to accept those courses. So their response was like they don't know how they became the bad person in this conversation, but they're supportive of the changes of data and getting additional courses on. So I think we can work with them to get more courses approved on their list. But the university requirements are going to be, it's just it's kind of the Wild West. Everyone does their own thing, so it's kind of almost institution by institution for now. But I think we'll see more. It's kind of like the SAT, ACT flexibility in terms of admissions. I think we'll see similar movement Algebra 2 next.
Mark, we appreciate you having that conversation with higher education and trying to kind of move some of those mountains with them. I think that will help create more access and for students to be able to go on to a 4-year college. In the chat, Beth was talking about that they're working with their local community colleges to do dual credit and even some remote learning for some of the rural districts around math specifically. And then Jacqueline had put something in the the chat as well that was interesting is that what she's seeing is that students who are not passing Algebra 2 with a C or better have to go to community college, and that the community college graduation rates for transfer are pretty low. So 30 to 40% in Oregon. So that's what she's finding.
Yeah, and there's data on students who get placed in a remedial math course and how many of those actually make it out. And I think if a student gets placed in any lower than 1 level math course, I think the attrition, like it's a talk about like 80% graduation rates. This is 80% dropout rate. Like 20% of students who get placed in a remedial class have like complete degree. So I think part of the work, I think we want to, how can we teach the students they need to know in those remedial classes while they're still in high school, so they don't have to take one. And what they need to know is Algebra 1. It's not algebra. So those remedial classes are not Algebra 2. They're not getting placed in. They're getting placed in those classes because they struggle with middle school math. They struggle with Algebra 1. So taking an Algebra 2 class doesn't help them learn that, because it's like taking a biology class to get better at physics. So it's a different class. So I think we need to if we focus that third credit on Algebra 1 and help them understand that, I think I just don't want the class to be exactly the same. Just don't repeat Algebra 1. If you took Algebra 1 and you took the jump and you're still struggling, but it's like, maybe take financial algebra, take a class that's, it's still that content, but it's a different context. So it's not repeating a course. I think we need to get out of repeating courses as well. 20% of students repeat Algebra 1-ish, 25. So I think how can we create options that still can be Algebra 1 level type content, but just a different context, applied Algebra 1 class.
And then it looks like one last comment in the chat is from Jacqueline about dividing student body right now for who would be in business or applied math, that students would be on the free and reduced lunch. Sorry, I just understand. These students would be on the free and reduced lunch list. And then if she went into higher math classes, Algebra 2, the students would be white and not on the list. She's wondering about the equity lens, if it's being used in these types of decisions. So Mark, maybe the question is with your math work, are you asking districts to use an equity lens and how they're making decisions around course planning, scheduling, master scheduling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the equity work is like seeing yourself, seeing math is useful. It's about your identity. It's about seeing the ability to apply math. I think that's what's missing for a lot of our students. And I think as we create these courses, giving students options to understand what's in those, like if you want to be right now, if an adult in the system is making a choice of who's accelerating, who's not, who's advanced and who's not, I think that's where these biases come in. And we see a lot of these placements of oversampling from white and Asian students and accelerate because that's what we see. And I think if the students knew what it took to be in the calculus path or what it was in algebra, like give them options. So I think there's the ideas of embedded honors and creating options that start at grade 9, help not track students back in 4th or 5th grade or 6th grade is when it starts now. So how can we push that off to 9th grade so all students, the late bloomers, have a chance to do advanced work as well.
Great, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for coming and talking about Mathways and your work around the math pathways. This is fantastic work and just such a need for our students. So thank you. Please reach out to Mark if you have any questions. His email is in our agenda. I'll also link, Mark, there was an interest for your PowerPoint. Would it be something that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, I'll put the link in again.
Great, I could link it in our PowerPoint. Oh, Mark, thank you. I couldn't put that in. I did put a survey in as we're starting to wrap up this year and look for next year. We'd love to hear from you on how we can do better, get better, how we can offer times that would allow more people to be able to come. Not more times, but like what time would be the best to have more people. We have about 70 something people on our list who are invited, but as you can see, this is how many can typically turn out for a meeting. So we'd love to get more people here. And Oscar would also love to hear from you around how to help with membership. And then also we'd love to know more about how we can do better at two-way communication, which is an ongoing continuous improvement process. So thank you all for your time and your work. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next month. And that will be our last meeting for the school year. Please reach out if you have any questions too. So, thank you.